Okay, we are live. Hello, hello. So, welcome to today's video where I'm going to be talking about why our systems of dominance are not working for anybody. And the reason I want to have this conversation is because the way that humans have been doing life for a very, very, very long time, and the way we have been setting our systems up for a very, very, very long time, have been centered around this idea of dominance and certain groups of people having more access, more power, more wealth than other individuals. And a lot of the time, in order to have that more access, more abundance, more safety, more wealth, they have had to, or they have chosen to, exploit other groups of people, to oppress them, to create a situation where they do not have equal capacity to thrive in order that they create that abundance for themselves. And we are living in a world right now where that is still very much the case, where we have all over the world, we have different cultures, different systems, different ways that things are set up. But generally speaking, there is a group of people who have more access, more wealth, more privilege than other groups of people, and they are using the labor and they are using the fact that these other groups of people are being exploited in order to have more access, wealth, and power for themselves. And what we need to understand about this dynamic is that, in my opinion, it is not working for anybody, in the sense that it is not ultimately healthy and it is not sustainable, and it is not going to be the thing that allows humanity to carry itself forward for very much longer. And so before we even get into this, I want to be very, very careful with what I'm saying here. And I want to start with saying that the suffering of the people who are in positions of dominance is not equal to the suffering of the people who are being dominated. Okay? This is not about equating the suffering and saying that everybody is suffering and everybody is suffering equally, and this is why we need to change things, because everyone is ultimately suffering the same. This is not true. People who are being oppressed and people who don't have access to safety and don't have access to getting their needs met and who are being exploited are absolutely suffering more than people who are in a position of dominance. And that is just how reality is. The more access, the more wealth, the more power you have on our planet, the more access to safety and the things that you need to survive and to stay well you have. So even if you're suffering in your dominant position, that suffering is going to be less in a lot of ways than suffering in a position when you have less than you need and when you don't have access to safety. And then again, when you're being antagonized by culture and when the culture that you live in is set up to exploit you or to harm you or to cause you harm, just like getting through a normal day is absolutely harder for you than someone who is living in a society that is set up to support them. So we are not saying that those who are being oppressed are suffering the same as those who are dominating, and we're not saying that the pain of the people who are dominating is the same as those who are being oppressed, because it isn't. And that is just a reality and that is just a fact, and I wanted to state that at the very beginning, that I am not equating these two things, and I am not saying that the pain is equal, and I am not saying that, we're all suffering equally and therefore that's why we should change. No. We should change purely because all human beings deserve a fair chance at a good life. That is the only reason we should change. There doesn't need to be any more discussion past that. If we are really tapping into our empathy, or if we're really tapping into just anyone who's listening to these videos who considers yourself to be someone who is conscious or who is raising your consciousness or who is trying to live a conscious life, this should be like a fundamental assumption at some point when you've done your healing work enough. You're going to come to a place, if you're not already there, where you fundamentally believe that just life has value, that human life has value, that earth life has value, and that given where we are in our understanding of technology and our understanding of how systems work, how weather systems work, the fact that we can take ourselves out of the food chain, the fact that we have created and generated so much wealth in concentrated areas around the world lets us know that we have the capacity to create societal systems where everybody has a fair chance at getting their needs met. Okay, so again, this isn't about saying that we just create communism where everything's just handed out to everybody equally and all that stuff. This is about saying that we have adequate resources, adequate understanding, adequate technology, that we can create a world where everyone has access to the things that those who are in dominant positions in our cultures have access to. Clean water, safe housing, education, upwards mobility, jobs that pay a living wage. These things should be, especially in westernized countries, universally available. This is what we're talking about when we talk about redistribution. This is what we're talking about when we're saying we're going to try and create an equitable culture, where we're going to try and move towards that. We're not saying give everyone a handout, make it so that no one has to do anything, and everyone just gets to laze around and do whatever they want. Because again, we have to understand, in order for society to continue to function, people need to be working. People need to do things, right? Like, food doesn't grow itself, food doesn't transport itself, buildings don't build themselves, infrastructure doesn't infrastructure itself. We need to understand that in order for culture to exist, in order for our society to go on the way that it is, people are always going to have to work. We are going to have to put in effort in order to create energy, in order to transport things, in order to do all the things that we do in a day. So this isn't, again, about saying there's some magical solution where everyone just has access to their basic needs and no one has to do anything. And then we become this lazy culture and this lazy society where no one is doing anything. That is not reality. That will never be reality. That could never be reality, because in order for anything to happen, work is going to happen. However, what I am saying is that we can create a world, especially, like I say, in westernized countries where we have extreme excess in terms of wealth, in terms of abundance, in terms of technology, resource, understanding. We can create a system where, again, everyone has access to the basic things that give them a chance to create a reasonable life for themselves. Because we have to understand that what people in positions of dominance in our cultures have is access to the resources, the safety, the education, all of the conditions that give them the capacity to create a good life for themselves, to create a life where they are able to meet their needs, to be safe, and to learn and to grow and expand and express themselves. That should be a foundational thing that's available to all people. And if we're really being honest with ourselves, we will understand that the more people who have access to these basic things, the more, basic, and again, I'm saying basic in terms of they are meeting our basic needs and they are meeting our basic wants, but they are not basic. It's very amazing that we've created enough technology and all of these things that we have that can give us the capacity to have access to all of these things on a regular basis, taking ourselves out of the food chain, making it so that, again, we can literally always have food, and we can always have a safe place to live, and we can always have education. Like the fact that we've created that anywhere on the planet is quite astounding. So I know I'm saying basic, but I mean, I hope you can understand what I mean. That for all of us to have access to these basic things, more and more people are going to be elevated and supported into becoming people who help us innovate on this planet, who have something to offer and who offer it. And I'm going to get to that later in the video, is like, we have this cultural narrative of the struggle being the thing that creates the great human, and that the more people are kind of like held out and their life is made horrible, the more they are going to turn into great people, because great people are built through adversity and challenge. And again, I think that there's a large part of this narrative that is indoctrination in order to keep these systems of oppression going. And there is a lot of indoctrination in our culture that teaches us to keep these systems of oppression going. And this myth of the hero's journey and the person who was antagonized the most, fighting for themselves and coming up through the ranks and pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, becoming the great person. We have created a myth around this that I think in a lot of ways tends to justify in our minds the fact that so many people aren't given what they needed, aren't given what they want, are antagonized, they're not made to live in a safe environment. And we're saying it's good for them. That's what creates winners. That's what creates people who are gonna innovate and change things. And when the reality is, most of the people on this planet who truly innovate and who change things and who do things in our culture that are really, really beneficial were people who were supported, are people who had access to basic things during their upbringing and were able to use that and utilize that to create something amazing. And again, this is not to say that there haven't been people who have been incredibly antagonized in culture, who have had to fight for everything that they ever had, and who came up with something amazing and helped society or even did good for themselves. Those people absolutely exist. But also, like, how great could those people have been had they not had to fight so hard? Right? We're looking at the survivorship bias, and we're looking through the lens of saying that, like, because there have been some really, really, really amazing people who have risen out of oppression and who have risen out of being in truly horrible conditions, that it is those horrible conditions that created the good person. And I think that that is not true. I think a lot of the time, people who have done great things and who go on to be, system changers are people who had access, are people who had education, are people who had safety. And innovation, again, we're being told that innovation only comes from hardship and struggle, and I think to a degree that is true. And I also think that the more reasonable access you have to basic functional things, the more capacity you have to innovate, the easier it is to innovate. So I really genuinely believe that the more people we actually supported in our culture, the more our culture was actually showing up for and creating a system where we said life is what has value, so how can we create a system that supports as much life as possible, we would see way more people innovating and coming up with awesome things, and we would stop losing so many people to antagonism and oppression that we don't need to be losing. This is something that I really think we are not understanding, and that we will start to see more of when and if we start to create more equitable systems. When we give more people a chance, more people are gonna have more things to offer to society. We are not going to become lazy people and a lazy culture and a lazy society that does less and less and less. We're gonna have more capacity to innovate, more capacity to change things, more capacity to move forward, because we'll have more people who are able to contribute because they're not just fighting to try to survive. Okay, so that's one point. The next point is, again, that I fundamentally believe, and I hope that everyone watching this fundamentally believes, that life, that human life, has value. That it should not have to be something that people have to prove their capacity to support our systems of excessive consumption and production before the life is deemed valuable. But that is the system that we currently have. Our systems of dominance, generally speaking, say those who are already at the top are at the top and they deserve to be there. And they're basically going to be there for their whole lives, essentially, no matter what they do. Because that's how our systems are set up. The people who are born into situations of dominance can just sustain that and maintain that and coast on that and even be completely unaware of it for most of their lives. They can live in their little cultural bubbles, in their societal bubbles, where they literally believe that everyone has what they have, and they believe that everyone is living a life that is similar to the life that they're living. And so then when they see people who are struggling, who are not able to live the life that they're able to live, they judge them as making bad, wrong, and irresponsible choices, as though they had the opportunity to live a good life like the people in the dominant positions in our culture did, and just made bad choices and just chose not to. And this is a big fundamental misunderstanding that keeps a lot of people away from empathy and keeps us from understanding how our systems function. It's that we, again, in positions of society, like myself included, where I was given a basic education, I was given a safe home to the degree that I had that, I had food, I always had food, we always had clothes, like I wasn't living in a situation where I was living paycheck to paycheck. And I had access to upward mobility in culture based on a lot of things that are not things that I chose. Like based on the way that I look, based on where I was born in the world, based on the passport that I have, based on the intelligence that I was just born with, I was able to work my way up in society in many different ways purely because of the position I was born in. And so I know that I worked hard to get to where I am, and that is absolutely true. But I also understand that not everyone had the opportunities and had the ability to work hard like me and to end up where I ended up. I know that there are a lot of people out there, based on where they were born in our systems of hierarchy, on where they were born on the planet. There are people out there who work way harder than me, who do way more in a day than I've ever done, who are putting in so much more effort than I ever did. And they are not reaping the rewards that I reaped. They are not getting the payoff that I got because society isn't set up to support them the way that it was set up to support me. And I know that. I've seen that with my own eyes. I've traveled the world. I know what this is like. I was born way up the ladder, and I know that. So even though I had to put in work, and even though I had to put in effort, and even though I wasn't handed this life that I have, it's still like the effort that I put in was gonna reap so much more reward than it ever would for other people. And that's part of understanding how our society functions, is that a day's work is not the same for everybody, right? When everyone says, you have the same number of hours in the day as Beyonce, that is an unreasonable thing to say to people. That is not reality, in the sense that, because what people usually mean by a statement like that is that we all have the capacity to create for ourselves the things that Beyonce has created for herself if we just work as hard as she does. But again, that is absolutely not true. Because of the fact that she has so much wealth and so much access and so much privilege, that means the work that she puts in a day is going to yield so much greater result for her based on how our systems are set up than it would a single mother who's working 2 minimum wage jobs and isn't making ends meet, who didn't get an education, who didn't have access to safety, maybe she's got some trauma. This single mom can work 20 hours a day, and she's never going to have what Beyonce has. She doesn't have childcare. She doesn't have people who can prepare her food for her and work her out and maintain her home for her and all of these things. She has to do all those things. And she has to work. And she has to care for the children. And she has to do all of these things. So again, she's going to be working way harder than Beyonce just to keep her head above water. We don't all have the same number of hours in the day. We don't all have the same outcomes in the hours that we put in. And this is what we mean when we say that we have systems of dominance in our culture. That there are people who can use the labor of others, who can exploit the labor of others for their own gain. And that this creates a situation where the people who are in a position of dominance continue to get wealthier and wealthier and wealthier, more access, more privilege, at the expense of people who are working for them in order to create the situation where they can continue to do what they're doing, right? Like the people who are cooking Beyonce's food and cleaning her home and doing all of these things so that she can go and make music and make millions and millions and millions of dollars doing something that society really, really values. She can pay them minimum wage, which is oftentimes not a living wage. And what needs to get done for her gets done. So she can continue, like I say, to invest more and more of her time enriching herself. Whereas these other people, they're going to work all day. They're going to put in a full day's work, and they're not going to be able to move themselves forward in society. They're not going to be able to move themselves forward in their life because the opportunity that they're being given is not the same. That's what dominance looks like. That's what hierarchy, that's what exploitation looks like. We need to understand that the more people are not given an opportunity to make a living wage at what they're doing, the more people are not given an opportunity to have basic safety in their living situation, the more people are not given an opportunity to have access to education, the more people who are not given an opportunity to not be antagonized by law enforcement, or the more people we have as an exploited working class. Okay, so again, this myth that if we gave everyone an equal opportunity, that we would lose the working class, it's a myth. It's not reality. In real reality, if the working class were given, like I said, living wages. So a big thing that I want to highlight here is that a lot of the problems that we're facing on this planet in terms of exploitation and the fact that people who are living in our culture don't have reasonable access to a reasonable life is because of how corporations are set up. We need to acknowledge that the way that our corporate system functions, it functions off, again, one understanding, that profit for the shareholders and profit for the people at the top of the company is the main goal of the company. As much profit for the people at the top as possible. That is how our corporate system is set up. And in westernized cultures, we are living under essentially corporate rule. Corporations are essentially the ones that are deciding everything for how society functions. Corporations own the government. Corporations determine who is going to work where, what the wages are going to be, who's going to have access to education, what that education is going to be good for or not good for, what is promoted in the algorithms and not. Corporations essentially run the planet. And corporations, again, work on the fundamental principle that life is not what has value. Corporations work under the fundamental principle that the corporation has value. That profit margins need to be absolutely increasing at all times, no matter what the cost. And in order for that to happen, exploitation has to be the name of the game. The only way that we have the systems we have where there is essentially like exponential growth for corporations at pretty much all times is only because they know how to exploit the working class. They know how to exploit the earth in order to make that happen. And when we can understand this, that our systems of dominance have turned into how do we jigger society so that the most amount of profits can be generated for corporations at all times. This is what our systems of dominance and hierarchy have created. A place where huge swaths of people do not have access to what they need to live a basic life. Because they are the exploited working class who was working for less than minimum wage, putting in a full day's work, getting, working in horrible working conditions, being exploited by corporations. Exploited by people who are benefiting from the profits of corporations. So that corporations can continue to grow at the expense of humanity. And the reason that this is not working for any of us is multifactorial. Number one, let's just look at our food system. So much of the time, individuals are blamed for their health, right? When someone is sick, when someone is chronically ill, when someone is mentally ill, but physically ill in some way. There is a tendency in society for people to say, what bad choices did you make that led you to that health problem? What poor choices did you as an individual make that led you to that health problem? Why are you not eating healthy? Why are you not exercising? Why are you not doing all the things that you should be doing in order to be healthy. And there's stigma and there's judgment around everybody who is not quote unquote healthy, which again, we can talk about that more later about how that's even just a thing that changes with literally every generation, every couple of weeks, what health is and who's going to be valued and not valued as healthy. But we'll get into that later. There's a judgment that people who are not healthy are simply making bad choices, and it's their fault that they're not healthy. If we zoom out, we can see that we live in a world where it is not true that everyone has equal opportunity and access to the conditions that would give them the ability to be healthy. Corporations control our food. So much of the food that is produced on our planet today is nutritionally deficient, man-made. Okay, again, I don't want to demonize foods as being good and bad and right and wrong, because that's not what we're talking about here. But I think that we can objectively say, hopefully we're in a world where we can still objectively say, that the more processed a food is, the more steps removed from nature a food is. Generally speaking, not all the time, most of the time, the less nutritionally valuable it is going to be for us. We are seeing a massive rise in foods that have been created by corporations, right? Our food system is being inundated with foods that are not, meat, vegetables, fruits, grains, nuts, seeds, things that the human body have been eating for most of human history. This processed food world that we're living in, the ultra processed foods that are very readily available most places. This is something we've only seen in the last 100 years since the Industrial Revolution started. And we're seeing very detrimental effects on the body, right? So we can argue all day about what the ideal diet for the human is. But if we're not being able to be honest and say that, probably speaking, if you're going to choose a diet because you have access and money and wealth and privilege and are capable of doing it, that is mostly made up of foods that a few generations ago our grandparents would recognize as food, right? Fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, meat, dairy, things that come from somewhere on the planet and aren't literally created by a corporation, you're probably going to be pretty okay, right? You might not be the most amazing, perfect, but you're probably going to live a pretty good, healthy life from that. Whereas, like I say, now we are living in a world where more and more and more and more people, because of the way that food is subsidized, because of the politics behind food, because of the ways corporations are controlling who has access to what food, when and where, because corporations control the prices of food, we have more and more and more people who the food they can't afford, the food they can find, is these ultra processed foods that can sit on a shelf for 20 years and not go bad. And that's the bulk of their diet because that's what they have access to. Because that's what's available to them, and that's what's available to them in their price range. Because the corporations are setting the prices of food, and the corporations are deciding where that food is going to be distributed. Then at the same time, corporations are setting the wages of the people who work. Because most people work for a corporation. Somewhere along the line, most people are employed by a corporation. They're employed by a company that is owned by a corporation. And corporations are setting the wages, and therefore they are deciding where the jobs are, what quality those jobs are going to be, what kind of pay you're going to get for the job, and then what food you're going to have access to from working that job. They are also deciding what your working conditions are going to be like. So how well that working condition is going to support your human body, how much sunlight you're going to have exposure to, how much you're going to be able to be outside, what kind of environment you're going to be in, city, rural. They're determining how much extra time you're going to have for exercise or leisure activities or stress reduction. They're again determining how much money you're going to have to pay for these health supportive things. Do you see what I'm saying here? To blame our health on the individual without looking at the system means we're not understanding what's happening. People are not just making bad choices. People are not in full and complete control over their health. Corporations, for the most part, are making a huge, huge amount of the conditions that we live in. So for people who are in positions of wealth and power, we can choose to eat more and more fruits and vegetables. We can have access to less and less ultra-processed foods and more natural foods. We can have access to supplements and nutritional things that help us when we're not getting enough. We have access, usually, to clean water, to working conditions that allow us to have extra money and extra time to exercise and take care of ourselves and be in the sunshine or go in a cold plunge or do all these things. Right? Like we idolize these people who eat healthy and who work out without understanding that like the fact that they are able to choose that means that they are in a position in society that is much higher than a lot of other people. And then people who are not in those positions feel bad about themselves and feel like they're failing and they're doing something wrong because they aren't able to look healthy, they aren't able to be healthy, and society blames them when we're not, again, looking at the conditions that they have versus the conditions of someone who is in a higher level of society. And that's just one area, health. We have been brainwashed, again, into saying everyone's health is completely their own responsibility. Everyone has the capacity to be as healthy as they want, and if you're not, it's just your fault. And that is gaslighting so that we don't look at the system, so that we don't blame the corporations, so that we don't look at our systems of dominance and say, maybe it's not individuals making bad choices. Maybe there's something more to this. We're not blaming the finger, we're not pointing the finger of blame where the finger of blame belongs. And that's, again, just one thing to look at. And then, even if you're in a position of dominance, if you're growing up in a position of culture where you have access and you have resources and you can make the choices to be healthy, you're not safe there either. Because then there's all this judgment on you that you need to be. That if you don't look right, if you don't look healthy, if you're not perfectly how you should be, again, you're an irresponsible, bad person. Our society judges everybody based on how they look and determines what kind of value we're going to put on that life based on how healthy it is compared to whatever we think is healthy right now. Like right now, the trend is lifting weights and bulking up. Okay, well, again, think about what access and privilege you have to have in order to have the praised healthy body that is praised and healthy right now. You have to have the disposable income enough to support your 2,000, 2,500, 3,000 calorie a day diet of, perfectly assessed carbs, proteins, fats. You got to get your micronutrients, your micronutrients, your macronutrients. Got to hydrate. You got to do all these things in order to have that perfect nutrition. And then you have to have disposable income to be able to go to a gym on a regular basis. You have to have disposable time to be able to go to a gym on a regular basis and still take care of your house and go to school and do all these things. You have to be in such a position of dominance already to be able to have that body. And then, like I say, it's not even that we're doing it for ourselves most of the time. We're doing it because we have to fit into culture. Because to not have that body, to not look like that, to not participate in that trend, is to be ostracized, is to be told that you're not right, that you're not good, that there's something wrong with you. So even when you're in a higher position in society, trends are always changing. What's in and out is always changing. What's acceptable is always changing. Why? Because that's what's good for corporate profit. If we valued clothes for how durable and how long they last, corporations would go out of business. If we all bought a pair of pants and a pair of shirts that fit and were great and were high quality and lasted a really long time, and then we didn't buy clothes again for 5 years because they lasted, corporations would go out of business. So we're never allowed to do that. Trends are always changing, style is always changing, fashion is always changing. Why? To make sure that those who are in the system of dominance are constantly in a state of manufactured insecurity so that they will continue to be good producers and good consumers that keep corporations functioning and profiting every quarter. And we're pressured into doing it by everyone else who's in the dominant places in society. We judge each other, we tear each other down, we're constantly on top of each other, comparing one another, and basically not even really understanding that we're constantly signaling to the world with our choices, I'm rich, I have money, don't worry. And we have to be doing that constantly. Otherwise we get judged and we get ostracized and we get criticized, and it can literally affect your capacity to get a job. It can affect your capacity to find a mate. It will affect your capacity to buy a house or to have. We're judged in society. And these things, if you don't look wealthy, if you don't look like you are able to keep up with corporate trends in your health, in your fashion, in your car, you will get denied a loan, you will get denied a job, you will get denied. So it's not to say that those in the dominant position are always safe. It's you have to be continually fighting to be in these positions of dominance. Because again, it's all about what supports the corporation. We are trained to be pitted against one another constantly so that corporations can exploit us for labor, for production, and for consumption to continue to meet their profit needs. This is not working for anyone. So again, now let's look at how this is not working for the people who are in positions of dominance. Everything I just said. Even when you're in these upper echelons of society, there is going to be a continual, so again, remember, people who are in the lower echelons of society have actual insecurity. And it's manufactured in the sense that we have enough technology, resource, and understanding to distribute food properly, to distribute wealth properly, to do what we're doing in a way that could make everyone have a basic way of life. We have that. The amount of money that corporations are making profit-wise, if it was just given to their workers so that they could have a chance at a living wage, we would have a reasonable society. If we used all of our technology and understanding to distribute real food to the whole country, we would have most people having access to what they need to have a basic sense of health. We have the capacity to do that. And the reason we don't do that is because corporations want to win. And corporations need that exploitative labor in order to make their profits work. And they exploit that labor by making them insecure on purpose so that they will then be willing to work for less than what they are worth, because that's better than no work at all. And then again, we judge people who get into crime and who decide not to work without saying, well, their other option is shitty, horrible work that doesn't pay the bills. Maybe crime or doing these other things seem more lucrative. We see people who give up, who are maybe addicted, who have all these things, and we judge them as making bad choices instead of saying, well, maybe you would give up too. If your prospects were what theirs are, you probably wouldn't be wanting to sacrifice your life to that either. Okay, so that's actual discontent, actual insecurity that is being manufactured because it doesn't have to be that way. And then for the people in the dominant sectors of society, we are in a constant state of manufactured discontent, of constantly being told we're not good enough, we're not enough, we're not enough, we're not enough, we're not enough, so that we will constantly feel the need to consume and produce. So that we will constantly feel the need to consume and produce. Because so long as we're consuming and as long as we're producing, we are feeding corporate interest. So long as we are continuing to take more for ourselves and to justify that as abundance or spirituality beyond what we need, we are supporting corporate growth. And again, we are manipulated into it by being constantly told how not enough we are, how what we have is not enough, how what we're wearing is not enough, how we look is not enough, what we're doing is not enough. We all walk around feeling like we're failing all the time, and that is on purpose. And then we gatekeep each other by judging each other and fearing each other and telling each other how not enough we are. And it all feeds into this corporate greed. And then we are being asked to deny our humanity over and over and over again. In order to keep this system going, we have to be disconnected from our own sense of justice, from our own sense of life having value for the fact that it exists. We have to be disconnected from, like I say, empathy for others. We have to be in a position where we are willing to judge others as being not good enough, not productive, not healthy, not making the right choices. Judging ourselves constantly feeling like I am failing, I am doing the wrong thing. We have to be disconnected from our ability to rest, to find pleasure in simple things, to relate to one another. Because again, if we were to have real intimate connection with our friends and family, if we were to have real intimate connection with our neighbors and the people around us. This would totally fuck up how much we're willing to participate in our shitty culture. We have to be in a constant state of worrying about ourselves, defending ourselves, putting on a front, pretending we are a certain way, pretending we're living a certain life, pretending we have all of our ducks in the row, pretending everything is fine, putting things out on social media, whatever it is, making ourselves look like we are good enough. So much so that we don't have time to actually be a real human. To keep your head above water, even in our systems of dominance, even when you're in a situation where you're the dominant one, you have to be in a constant state of denial of your humanity. We have to be in a constant state of denial of our humanity. We can't be looking at how what we are benefiting from is harming others. We can't look at how our choices led to us having way more opportunity than everyone else. We can't look at what we actually need and what we actually want in terms of connection and being our authentic selves and any of that, because that wouldn't fit in to the excessive consumption and production model that we have to be in. We're all exhausted. We're all disconnected. We all feel empty inside because all that is available to us in terms of what gives us any kind of reprieve from life or any kind of answer to any of the pain we're in is consume more or produce more. And that's not a human life. And again, like I said, we are so forced into this situation where we can't be our authentic selves. We can't have authentic connection with one another because we're trained to see each other as either competition or how are you going to help me move forward in this system of consumption and production. Most of us don't know how to have authentic, vulnerable, intimate relationships because that was never taught. And in fact, that's the opposite of what's taught. We're taught how to be socialized. We're taught how to be what everyone wants us to be. We're taught how to live up to society and what society expects of us, which is, for most of us, to deny who we actually are. And then again, we have to work jobs we don't like. We have to wear clothes that don't feel good. We have to do all of this stuff to keep our heads above water, to be the people that everyone wants us to be, so that we don't get completely ostracized and we're exhausted and everything feels like shit. And then we're like sold that luxury is the answer. You'll get that vacation. You'll have that shiny handbag. You'll have the new nails, and that's supposed to be good enough. And it isn't, because that's not what the human life wants or needs. That's what's good for a corporation. So no one is winning. We are all, and then at the end of the day, right? We're losing our environment. This growth at all costs goes outside of our natural systems. So even if we don't destroy ourselves as a humanity, just on this humanity level, we're going to destroy ourselves environmentally if we don't start changing how we do things. Growth at all costs, expansion at all costs, is not a natural thing that we can do. It is not working. So it's working in the sense that there are a lot of people who have a lot more than they actually need. It's working that some people have massive access to safety and resources and upward mobility at the expense of other people. It's working in the sense that lots of people in the middle class have a pretty good life in terms of having our needs met, but it's not working in terms of longevity. It's not working in terms of our humanity. It's not working in terms of the environment. It's not working in terms of supporting what actually has value, which is life. Right now, we are completely living in a world where we have been told that the thing that has value is corporations. And that life has to live up to and measure up to the expectation of consumption and production that corporations give out in order for their profit margins to ever be increasing. That is a totally messed up way to live. We aren't going to survive that. Even those who are in positions of dominance aren't going to survive themselves doing that. This isn't going to work long term for any of us. So this is what I want us to be thinking about when we're hating ourselves, when we're judging other people. Who is profiting from you hating yourself and judging other people? Who is profiting off telling you that all of your pain is your fault and the wrong choices you are making? Who is profiting when you look out and see that if everyone isn't fully successful in our system, that it's their fault? Who is profiting off ever-changing health, diet, fitness, clothing trends? Who is profiting off of the fact that processed food is more and more and more available and real food is less and less and less available? Who is profiting from education not being equally accessible? Who is profiting from you feeling like shit about yourself all the time so that you're not looking at the systems? This is what the self-love path should lead us to. Self-love, what I teach anyways, is we need to start looking at systems. We need to step out of this idea that we are always failing and shameful and wrong and bad and the system is exactly how it should be, and that we suck if we can't live up to it. There's a much deeper truth here. So again, if you want more support, check out my YouTube channel, check out my Instagram, check out my mystery school. But this is what we really need to look at. These systems of dominance are not working. Hierarchy is probably always going to exist. Hierarchy is always going to exist. There are always going to be people who are capable of dominating others. We are not going to get rid of hierarchy, and it's not even that we need to necessarily get rid of hierarchy, because there is a such thing as people being experts. There is a such thing as society is complicated enough that everyone can't have an equal say in everything that's going on. We want experts. We want people who have the capacity to do things more than other people in positions where they are able to do that. But we got to be working together. When hierarchy is used for the good of everyone, it's really a good thing. It means people who are experts at medicine do medicine. People who are experts at food do food. And people who are not good at those things don't do those things, but they reap the benefits of those who are doing those things. And then you are doing the thing that you do. You see? Hierarchy will always exist. We need to stop choosing dominance and start choosing cooperation. That's the big difference. Seeing that we go further together. You are good enough. That is the revolution. When you start to see yourself as good enough, all the rest of this is going to start to become very clear to you. But you got to check out of this. This is where we are having our biggest power. You don't have to feel like you're shit. And when you start to check out of that, like I said, this whole house of cards falls. The systems of dominance we have on this world right now are so because they have convinced us that we suck. that we are constantly in this place of needing to improve and fix and change ourselves. When we wake up out of that, revolution is imminent. Okay? So I hope this was helpful. I hope this was good. Let me know what you thought. I always want to hear what you have to say. Check out the Mystery School. Thank you for watching the whole hour. This will probably go nowhere on YouTube because it's a controversial subject, but it has to be said. Someone has to say it. I know lots of people are saying it, and I want to be one of those people. So, thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next video. Mwah.